In this episode, Zoe and Gisele continue their work to identify and label some key points using radians on their graph.
Are there any other points we think we can kind of like use some of this thinking to label?
So then this one would be pi, comma 2 radians. This one would be 3 pi over 2, comma 3, right?
Keep on writing it.
Something's wrong here.
Keep on writing it real quick.
Well, before you erase, can you tell me?
Yeah, I was just going to say, since pi over 2 is 1 radian, then you multiply pi over 2 times 2 to get pi for the x-axis, for the distance. So then I was just thinking if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you just multiply by 2. But that's not right.
So where did the 1 radian, so where did the y coordinate of our first point come from? How did you know that that was 1 radian?
It's not.
It's not.
Well, let's not go that far.
We guessed. Well, we said that one radius, like the measure of the radius, is equal to 1 radian.
Okay.
So then it would make sense then, since the height here is the radius of the circle, for it to be 1 radian.
Oh, okay, so we think that our y values on these units are wrong.
Okay.
Because in the little simulator thingy, it shows that a circle is 6.28 because it ends at 2 pi, meaning that this is 6.28.
Okay. And with 6.28, what is that measuring?
The total radians in the circle.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're
okay.
like connecting, we're saying that our x and y values, so our distance and our height, are equal to each other.
Okay. So we have this point labeled pi over 2 comma 1 radian.
Yes.
And we're thinking maybe this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
What did the x coordinate represent?
The distance that is in radians.
Okay, great. The distance of what?
That the point has traveled around the circle.
Okay.
So this right here.
That first quadrant that you guys
Yes,
kind of had
yes,
color coded the other day.
And we had that point labeled to when the point on the circle reaches the highest point on the circle.
Okay, great. I'm following you completely.
Okay.
Do you guys feel comfortable with that point?
Yes.
Okay. Now we have this other point.
Uh-huh.
What should it represent?
This point.
I'm sorry. This other coordinate. So we're comfortable with the pi over 2.
Oh, yes, like the y coordinate.
Okay.
We
Technically,
want,
go ahead.
so we want the y coordinate to equal this line right here.
How do you know?
Because
That's the highest point on the graph, because we want this point to equal this point on the circle. And since we set this middle line right here as 0, and this is like the height, because it like the point moves from here to here, and we want to know the height. This is the height, this line right here. So we want that to equal our y coordinate.
also that's just the radius of the circle.
And how do you know it's a radius?
Usually you'll look at a radius like this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is the same distance measured from the midpoint of the circle to the very edge of the circle around the entire circle.
Okay.
That's like the definition of a radius.
Very good. So does that tell you anything about your point? Does that make you want to keep anything the same, change anything about the point?
It makes sense that it would be 1 radian if we're saying that 1 radian equals 1 radius. However, if that's the case for this entire graph, then you're only going to end up with 4 radians, which
That's
is not
why I put this one as 6.28.
right.
So we think that our first point, this one right here, our y value is incorrect. Because if this is our y value and the point has already traveled like 1/4 of the circle,
Mm-hmm.
then that means that we would only get equal to 4 radians when a circle has 6.28 radians.
But I'm confused. I thought you told me the first coordinate measured the distance.
Height, silly.
Oh. So technically it doesn't matter? This doesn't have to be 6.28?
What doesn't have to be 6.28?
So we thought that our y value.
Wait, this will be 0.
Wait, hold on, so I'll explain it first. We
Oh,
thought
sorry,
that this
sorry.
y value right here had to be 6.28 since that's the end of the circle,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't because our x value is measuring our distance, which is equal to radians, while our y value is our radius, which doesn't have to equal to 6.28.
So one thing I would ask about that, you said the y value is the radius.
Yes.
No.
What do you mean no?
The y value is the height of the...
Which is equal to the radius.
Right, but then how would this be 0? The radius isn't 0. But it's 0 because there's 0 height, because it's at the midpoint. Does that make sense? That's what I was just gonna say, this is 1 because it's like it's above the mid. Do you know what I'm trying
Zoe
to say?
is saying that our points, this point right here, so this point and this point, should have a y value of 0 because its height is 0 because we set this middle of the circle as 0. So,
meaning that this y value of the pi over 2 should be the positive version of the y value of the 3 pi over 2. So they should be the same value, just one's positive, one's negative.
this is what we're sure of right now. This point.
Negative 1.
Okay. So I think you've explained 3 of the points. You explained pi over 2, 1 radian, pi, 0, and then 2 pi, 0. Now just this last point.
For our last point, which is the lowest height on our graph, we have 3 pi over 2, negative 1 radian.
Okay.
Because, as we already explained, this point right here, this is the highest point of the circle, which is this part. And this point right here represents the lowest part of the circle, which is this point. So since it's like the first point is equal to this little part right here, our radius, it should be the same exact radius right here. So it should just be negative 1 because it's below our 0 point, which is this line in the middle.
I agree.
After a little difficulty with height, they made some great progress identifying a handful of points on their graph.